Deception, lies, fakery, fraudulence, and forgery. This is what Intelligent Speech 2025 will be bringing to you.
My name's Otto English, and I will be talking about how bad history poisons politics for intelligent speech in 2025.
Hello, I'm Jo-Hedwig Theeuwissen. I'll be speaking at the Intelligent Speech 2025 about fake history and how to recognize it and how to hunt it.
Hello everyone, my name is Wesley Livesay, and I'll be speaking at Intelligent Speech 2025 on the topic of sacrificed in the name of deception, when deception has a very real human cost.
Intelligent Speech 2025 Deception will take place on the 8th of February 2025. Go to intelligentspeechonline.com to find out more.
Gamarjoba, and welcome to the history of Saqartvelo, Georgia. I'm your host, Roberto, and this is episode 41, Telephis-Ollaria. In today's episode, we will see how the Persian general Mihr-Mihroe solidifies his control of the Telephis region of Lazika. I want to thank my Patreon members who have been amazing as always with their continued support. This show could not run without you. Thanks to Audrey Neeson, Andrew Schneider, Mitchell Dutt, Eric Nicholson, Jared Eliasser, Hallie Kuntz, Ari Tena, Quinn Campagna, David Montgomery, Konstantine Megrilishvili, and Ashley Fisher. You are all amazing, and I value each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's episode. In the last episode, we finished up Procopius' account of the Lazic War, and now we are transitioning over to Agathius' account. Also, we saw the Roman army beating back the Persians to Kutaisi after slaughtering them on a mountain path. We start our story in the spring of 554 or 555, where sources are dubious on when this takes. And there we see the Persian general Mihr-Mihroe recovering from his defeat by the Romans in Kutaisi. The Romans had a good foothold along the mountain paths and fortresses in the area, and if Mihr-Mihroe wanted to break into the plains of the Black Sea coast, he would need to gain control of the forts in the Telephis region and control everything up to the Rioni River. The issue that Mihr-Mihroe had was, as I stated, the Romans controlled the plains and mountain paths leading into Telephis. The Roman general Mardin was stationed at the fortress of Telephis and ordered his men to keep watch on all the approaches leading into the area. The terrain only served to bolster his defense since the mountain paths had deep gorges running alongside them, had overhanging rocks making the paths narrower than usual, and very difficult for Mihr-Mihroe's large army to pass effortlessly. It didn't help that the other available paths were full of swamps and marshlands, and were rife with dense thickets of trees, making it slow to progress through the terrain easily, even for a man going on a journey for pleasure with not much on him. That, and even marching an army through the terrain, would make the Persian troops much easily succumb to any diseases brought by the natives of the swamps, which are known as mosquitoes. And the terrain wasn't all that General Mardin used to his advantage. To make sure that his control of the territory was absolute, Mardin ordered his men to fence off any part of the terrain that could be used for passage, and remove it from Persian access, since it would be guarded day and night. General Mihr-Mihroe knew that all of these things meant that his army, which had a numbers advantage over the Romans, would suffer heavy casualties. This meant that he had to surprise the Romans somehow. Well, how would the Romans drop their guard? Martin knew that Mihr-Mihroe was a tricky foe to deal with. As Mihr-Mihroe planned his ruse, it just so happened that he fell sick. The Persian general was confined to his bed, where he loudly lamented his fate, cursed everything about it, and moaned about his sickness loudly in a way that men tend to do when they are sick. Despite having medics around him giving him all sorts of medicines to improve his health, it simply did not. Getting sick in this day and age, especially in a fortress, would not be a good thing at all. It's safe to mention here that the biggest killer in a war is disease, so Mihr-Mihroe was probably dealing with something known as dysentery. For those of you who don't know what dysentery is, it's very bad diarrhea, which can kill you. The general's loud lamentations soon spread through the camp, leading to rumor that he was on death's door. Word soon arrived to the Romans via the troops in the Persian army who valued a good day's pay over loyalty to their Shahanshah and general, who received this news with happiness. The Romans were very happy. News spread through the Roman camp that potentially soon all the hard work that they were doing for General Martin would soon end, especially if the Persian general died from his illness. And once you have it, a few days later, the same disloyal Persians sold the information to the Romans about their enemy succumbing to his disease. The Romans relaxed their guard almost immediately, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off their shoulders. They had such smiles on their faces as the never-ending days of searching for new stable passageways in the perilous mountain paths, placing up fences along the mosquito-infested swamps due to those stable paths, and constant watch for Persian movement became all for naught. The Romans nagged their general to let them rest for a moment. Due to the loss of Persian leadership, they saw no reason to keep enforcing their control over the area when there was a large army with no leadership far from them. There would be no incoming battle with the lack of Mihr-Mihroe. Back in the Persian camp, the death of Mihr-Mihroe had a massive effect on the morale of the troops. They were dismayed, and even the general's closest advisors were at a loss of what to do. It was much to their surprise that 3 days after his death, Mihr-Mihroe had risen from the death and walked out to his troops and ordered them to prepare to march against the Roman fortress of Telephis. Now, what had Mihr-Mihroe done? Well, he obviously had faked his own death to his army, knowing he would have some sellouts and that the Romans would drop their guard. To help make this believable, he hid himself in a room for several days, even hiding the truth from his closest friends and advisors to further sell it as his actual death. As his army marched against the Romans, he ordered that they clear away any woods and rocks that impeded their progress. Roman relaxation of their watch ensured that they were not prepared for Persian action against them. They had withdrawn their scouts and soldiers from key passes, letting them rest in the Telephis fortress. When word arrived that the Persians were approaching the fortress, they had no time to shore up their defenses in time. General Martin saw that there were two options available to him. He could either stay and defend the fortress as best as he could, and inevitably lose his forces to the Persian general in a massacre, which would lead to the capture of the Telephis fortress, or he could retreat, save his men, and just give up the fortress in general. In the end, fighting would not let him survive the battle, and he knew that he had been outmaneuvered. Martin gave the order to his troops to grab what they could because they were retreating to the fortress of Ollaria, where his fellow generals, Bessas and Justin, were located right on the plains west of Telephis. The Roman army made their way out of the Telephis fortress and arrived at Ollaria safely. Once there, Martin and his army joined up with Justin and Bessas, and together they decided to make a stand against their enemies right there to prevent a series of Roman defeats that would lead the Persians from conquering Lazica and controlling the Black Sea coast. Well, let's take a look at some of the soldiers that had been left behind in Telephis before the Persians arrived. We have a Zanoi commander named Theodore, who was in control of a unit of 500 Zanoi troops. Now, Theodore was a Romanized Zanoi who had grown up in Constantinople and was now using his dual cultural identity for the glory of Rome. He had decided to stay behind and scout for Mihr-Mihroe's numbers, mettle, and intentions for his next steps. Luckily for General Martin, Theodore was a brave and diligent man who carried out his orders well. Theodore watched as Mihr-Mihroe took over the fortress of Telephis and how eager they were to continue conquering and to spill Roman blood. With that, he immediately departed to tell the general triumvirate, Justin, Bessas, and Martin. On the way to Ollaria, Theodore came across a group of Roman soldiers who had broken off from the main army and instead of returning to Ollaria, they instead decided that it was in their best interest to betray the people they were protecting, and act as vagabonds instead of soldiers. They had broken into the homes of the Lazai, carrying off with food and what little wealth they had, much to the chagrin of the Lazai. Theodore, despite his Roman upbringing, was still a man from the Caucasus, and his heart broke at seeing the Roman troops acting in such a way. He approached the men and reproached them for their irresponsible behavior, how they had betrayed the trust of the people who they were protecting, and most importantly, for not using their heads and realizing what trouble they truly were in as an army. Some of these troops had a visible change of expression as they realized the error of their ways, and they marched alongside Theodore to get back to the camp in Ollaria. However, Theodore would not arrive back to Ollaria in time. The Persian army had caught up to those troops who did not listen and march with Theodore, and killed most of them. There's a group of these remaining vagabonds who instead rushed back to the camp of Ollaria and banged against the gates of the fort, screaming at the top of their lungs to be let in, that the Persians were coming! This distress brought the Roman camp into disarray, leading to many of the Roman soldiers to panic and prepare to leave. The Roman general Justin, Bessus, and Martin would themselves fall victim to the panic, and instead of bringing their troops under control and staying to fight the Persian army like they said they would, they instead retreated to the island camp of Nessos, which was about 15 miles west from Ollaria. The Roman generals were entirely unprepared and had no other plan aside from retreat. Mihr-Mihroe arrived at Ollaria much later, and when he did, he found the camp abandoned. He walked around, he could be heard laughing at the Romans for their cowardice, and yelling many insults at them, which of course they could not hear. He took up shop in the room where the generals met, and there, after much examination of the area, decided that he could not advance on the Nessos camp, since he had not been able to establish supply lines, did not want to get surrounded in enemy territory, and he had no siege territory to take out the island fort. With that, Mihr-Mihroe decided that controlling the new gains would prove much better, and he ordered his men to build wooden planks and pontoons to ease their movement in and out of Telephis, mostly to help establish those supply lines. He then sent troops to reinforce his fortress at Onogouris, and from there, he returned to Kutaisi. However, on returning to Kutaisi, Mihr-Mihroe actually became sick this time, and he set off to Iberia to recover outside of the fortress, leaving his army Kutaisi to guard their new gains. He arrived at Metaskieta, the Iberian capital, and the great Persian general Mihr-Mihroe passed away from his illness. And this was for real this time. To connect with us, feel free to find us on social media under @history_Georgia or on Facebook, The History of Saqartvelo, Georgia. Our intro music is Bindisperia Sopeli by Zadashe. They were here in the US earlier and they were fantastic to see. Also, we have a website, so go to tsarpower.com, TSARPOWER.com. We will have a website link for just the Georgia podcast soon, but it's all under the same website. To help us continue, please feel free to subscribe to our Patreon or donate via Coffee or PayPal. Links are in the episode description. If you would prefer donating something a bit more tangible, we have an Amazon wishlist for you to peruse. However, the best way to help us is via review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your preferred podcast host, as it goes a long way of getting out the word about the show and helping us reach new people to learn about Georgia. Also, make sure it's just a 5-star review. We like those the best. Madlabada Nakmamdis, and thank you for listening to The History of Saqartvelo, Georgia. See you next time.